El Paso, Texas, September 21st, 1988. At 10:30 p.m., a woman named Nancy Salem returned home after an out-of-town trip. She had asked neighbors to pick her up at the airport.
You go ahead, Nancy. I'll get the bag. Go on.
Nancy was frantic about her 6-year-old daughter, Shafaa. All day long, her calls to the house had gone unanswered, and she'd been unable to reach her estranged husband, Dave Falah.
I remember walking into the door very fearful and very panicky.
Shafaa?
I remember going in and looking for Shafaa.
Shafaa? Shafaa!
She was not there. No one was there. And then was when I discovered a tape message that Dayfala had left for me.
Me and Shafaa, we're gonna go to Jordan. We're gonna go for about 3 weeks and we'll be back. Okay, we'll be back.
My heart wanted to say that they would be back in 3 weeks, as he stated. But I still, in the back of my mind, feared that he had left with Shafaa for good.
The 3 weeks came and went with no word from Dave Falah. Nancy was now certain that he had abducted their daughter. It was the final bitter outrage in a marriage which had started off so innocently.
Does it remind you so much of your home?
Nancy Hardy and Dave Falah El Salam met in El Paso in April of 1980.
I'd like to go there sometime.
They came from completely opposite worlds. Nancy was a devout Christian who had spent most of her life in Texas. Dave Falah was a Muslim who said he had come to America on a training mission with the Jordanian army.
Really?
To Nancy, the differences never mattered.
The first time I saw Dayfala, and I really do not know why, I do not understand this, but the thought came to my mind, I wonder if this is the man that God has sent for me to marry.
1 month after they met, Nancy and Dave Falah did marry. In 1982, Nancy gave birth to a daughter. She was named Shafaa Lucinda, which means healing light. Shafaa was an uncommonly beautiful child who inherited a striking mix of her parents' diverse ethnic features. When she was just 1, Shafaa began modeling and competing in beauty contests. In 1988, she was a Texas state finalist in the Miss American Princess pageant.
You know that's my favorite flavor?
But by the time Shafaa was 5, her parents' marriage had begun to disintegrate. Nancy says Dave Falah had a mean streak which became more and more pronounced as time passed.
Well, we just stopped to get some ice cream.
What ice cream?
Well,
2 hours, 3 hours, every time you go?
Dayfala was a very demanding, domineering type of husband. He didn't like Nancy to do many things, to go many places. And he was a very violent and angry person when he was mad, and he got mad at her quite a lot.
Sometimes he'd be just happy as can be with Nancy, and the next minute he'd turn around and just start yelling at her and dragging her around and yank her out, throw her in the car, and take off with her. You never really knew from 1 minute to the next what to expect from him.
Dave Falah's dark, mysterious side revealed itself in other ways. Nancy discovered that he had, in fact, deserted from the Jordanian army. Nancy also claims that Dave Falah began spending his evenings with fellow Middle Easterners who seemed to be involved in extremist political activities. Nancy and Dave Falah drifted further and further apart until finally they separated in 1987.
Now you be a good girl while I'm gone and Mom will be home.
After the separation, Nancy and Dave Falah remained cordial.
Oh, honey.
On September 19, 1988, when Nancy left town to attend to her late father's estate, it was not surprising that Dave Falah offered to drive her to the airport.
I'll miss you.
Shafaa was left with a housekeeper.
Shafaa came out to the car. She said, "Mama, will you take me with you?" But she was in school, and I felt like a couple of days business trip that she would be all right.
The next evening, Nancy returned to her motel room late. Around 1:30 a.m., Dave Falah called.
Hello, Nancy. Why are you being so late?
I've just been out visiting some friends.
Well, I just called to make sure that everything's okay with you.
Everything's fine. I'm fine.
The next morning, Dave Falah called again.
Hello?
Hello, Nancy. It's me.
He told Nancy he was going to pick up Shafaa and take her to school.
I'm going to take Shafaa to school now.
Well, they follow. You know she always goes to school with a friend.
As the day wore on, Nancy was nagged by suspicions. She called home every hour, on the hour, but could not reach Dave Falah or her housekeeper.
This is Shafaa Salem's mother?
Finally, she phoned Shafaa's school.
Do you think I could speak with her?
Sorry, Mrs. Salem, but I believe Shafaa's name was on the absent list today.
After I spoke to the school official, I knew something was wrong, that Shafaa should have been at school.
Thank you very much.
Then I really did begin to panic.
When Nancy returned home, she learned that Dave Falah had dismissed the housekeeper. She later discovered that just 2 one-way tickets to the Middle East. The local authorities and the FBI investigated, but little could be done with Dave Falah out of the country. When we return, Nancy investigates on her own and finds herself caught in a web of intrigue.
Unsolved mysteries.
He's a strange husband, Dave Falah. In the meantime, Nancy had moved from El Paso back to her hometown, Longview, Texas. In desperation, she put up part of her inheritance. Mineral rights she claims are worth $500,000 for information leading to Shafaa's return. Only then did she get a lead. In January of 1992, Nancy came back to El Paso to meet a mysterious man who claimed to be a reporter for a Lebanese newspaper. He had called her and said he had important information about her daughter.
Nancy, please have a seat.
Yes.
I'm very sorry I'm late. I was delayed.
Unbeknownst to the reporter, Nancy had asked a friend to stand by in the parking lot during the meeting. Before long, both Nancy and her friend began to suspect that the reporter had not come alone.
While I was sitting there, I saw a station wagon that kept circling the restaurant. He just kept going around and around. As I watched this man, he seemed very nervous, very upset about something. As he would go around the restaurant, he would even glance in the window.
The car circled the restaurant for nearly 2 hours. Nancy would later learn that it belonged to a Lebanese couple, but she could find no apparent connection to Dave Falah or the reporter.
Listen very closely to me, Nancy. I have a plan for you.
Meanwhile, the reporter was telling Nancy that Dave Falah and Shafaa were in Lebanon.
We will place your picture.
He then outlined a complicated scheme to fly Nancy to the Middle East, where she would be reunited with Shafaa.
Her back to you there.
But it would not be cheap.
I will need 250,000 American dollars in cash up front. Nancy, this is a very...
The man also demanded that he be paid another $250,000 upon Shafaa's safe return.
Do you want to see your daughter again?
Nancy decided to stall until she could contact the FBI. 10 days later, Nancy agreed to meet the reporter at the airport in El Paso. She was shadowed by FBI agent Mike Pierce.
First and foremost, I wanted to instill into her that her safety was the most important because we didn't really know who the reporter was. Wanted to make sure that she wouldn't take any unnecessary chances or even go with the reporter anywhere. She was to stay in the airport.
Nancy, it's good to see you again.
Second was to what kind of information he did have so that we could determine the validity of it.
Okay. Is this all right?
Yes, please be seated.
Now,
I want to talk to you about this phone call that you promised to Shafaa. When can I talk to her?
Nancy, you must be patient. Now is not...
In addition to arranging the phone call, the man had promised to bring a document which would allow Shafaa back into the United States. He failed to deliver on both counts.
Nancy, let me ask you, did you bring the money with you?
Well, no, not yet.
I suspected I was wasting my time with this man. I felt like he was toying around with my emotions. The motive to get money. And then I would never see my daughter.
The deal is off, okay?
I did not give him any money. I was warned by the FBI not to give him one dime, which I did not.
Without the money, I will do nothing.
While the FBI could never determine whether or not the man was a reporter, they did come to believe that he knew nothing of Shafaa's whereabouts. Nancy was back at square one. Then 3 months later, in April of 1992, Nancy's longtime friends, Carolyn and Pat Mitchell, were driving through El Paso when they had an unexpected encounter.
We saw a car go by with a woman in it who was wearing an Islamic veil. About the time she went past us, another car was following that one very closely.
Pat, that's to follow.
I couldn't believe it. We were both looking right at him. Just bingo, there he was. And then all of a sudden he was headed out of the way. And we got in as fast as we could behind him to follow him. And we followed him up the side street. And then it appeared that he saw us following, and so he started to stop at this house, and then he took off.
For Nancy, it was the first ray of hope in more than 4 years. She decided to stake out the house where Defalah's car had stopped. Nancy took along the same friend who had accompanied her to the restaurant. The two women waited throughout the evening. A black Monte Carlo was parked in the driveway.
You know, it's after 2 o'clock. Don't you think we should be going home?
They saw several people go in and out of the house, but no Defalah.
I'll show up here tonight anyway.
We decided to leave because of the late hour in the night, and we were tired. As I am driving down the street and taking a right and going back up the next street, all of a sudden, there's a black automobile pull right in front of me.
Billy me home! Billy me home! Back up! Back up! Back up! Go around! Quick!
The car that intercepted Nancy was the same black Monte Carlo that had been parked in the driveway.
They started chasing us. We were driving at really high speed.
Intercepted Nancy was the same black Monte Carlo that had been parked in the driveway.
They started chasing us. We were driving at really high speeds, and I was just really scared. But we just kept driving as fast as we could, and finally we did lose them.
Even though she never saw Defalah that night, Nancy is convinced that he was in El Paso and that his friends were trying to scare her off. Nancy believes it is as close as she has been to her daughter in 5 years.
I love Shafaa very much, and I do miss her very much. I want to reach out and touch her face. I want us to share our time together as a mother and a daughter, because no one can take away a mother's love. No one.
Shafaa Lucinda Salem is now 11 years old. She has brown hair and brown eyes, olive-colored skin, and a small heart-shaped birthmark or scar on the bridge of her nose. Defalah El Salam has been charged with kidnapping. He is 36 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, with black hair and an olive complexion. Defalah is a defector from the Jordanian army and has used the aliases Defalah Mohammed, Al Salem, and Danny Abraham. His real name may be Defalah El Jarina.